Greetings, I am Tom Earl, and this is my year of depth. We know you could be anywhere, so the fact that you are here today sharing your greatest gifts, your time and energy means the world to me. I hope you know that in this moment you are valued, you are loved, and you are appreciated just as you are. I deeply believe that we are all creatives. And what I've created for you is a series where we're going to use the same intro each week, but different guests that are going to bring to you specific and moving stories on how they tap into their creativity. All of us carry around what Brene Brown calls creativity scars, where at some point in our lives, usually when we were children, when we were expressing our creativity, usually an adult or someone we cared about shamed us. And it changed the way we viewed ourselves as creatives. My intention for this series is for you to let go of some of that shame and to tap more deeply into the power of your creativity. As I mentioned, each week, I'm going to share with you some fun stories, some powerful stories, some vulnerable stories of people sharing with you their creativity, and most importantly, their invitation to you to step more deeply into your creativity. Like I said, we'll use the same intro, but we're going to have different guests join us each week. So I think that's enough for me. Let's go ahead and jump into our next guest. Here we go. We are joined by another guest. I know her very well. She goes by the name of Adaora Nwandu Earl. How's it going, Adaora?
It's going very well, Tom Earl.
Today is July 1st. Adaora, for those who don't know you, how would you describe yourself in 6 words?
I like to think I'm kind, definitely enthusiastic, pretty determined, relatively ambitious, focused, and fun.
How did you come up with those words?
I think kindness is a family motto that comes down from my great-grandfather. My grandfather, his thing was always be kind. And it's passed through my parents, and it's something that we hold dear. So I focus on it daily to definitely try and get myself there. And then the rest, I think, are just through natural genes. I think I was just born one of those people who kind of focuses in on something and moves towards it in my start to finisher type of way. So the focus, ambition, and the determination are just kind of part of that same package. And I like to have a good time. So that's where the fun had to be part of it as well. Fun and funny, hopefully.
What do you think all of those together say about who you are?
I want to say it means I'm a Nigerian and I'm Igbo. So that would likely put us into a category that covers all those things. But I also think it says that I am empowered enough to state my positive attributes without being overly self-conscious about it, but keeping a little bit of humility and being aware that I may strive, but I may not always achieve.
When you say it says that I am empowered to name my attributes, it sounds like there's an intention, there's a recognition when you say that. Can you go a little bit deeper?
Definitely. I think, and it's one of the things I'm always saying to you, I get so angry with all those love songs about men who are saying, oh, she don't know she's beautiful, and how the wounded bird woman is the sort of woman that's very cool and very sexy and the one that society tells you you're supposed to try and be. And so many discussions about humility and what humility should look like, and even a discussion in the Glennon Doyle book, just about how, as a woman, you're supposed to perhaps not be fully aware of your powers and not own your powers. And even when you do own your powers, you're supposed to act like you don't. And that's supposed to be what makes you super attractive. And I rebel and reject all of those things, even though I do find myself slightly cowed by them. And I think I'm naturally self-deprecating because I think it's funny. And I also come from a people that have a superiority complex. So it's also me fighting against the fact that we, as Igbo people, think we're amazing and faultless and flawless. So balancing those two things of being a woman and expect to be humble, and also knowing my own worth and trying to make sure I present that in the world.
I'm glad you elaborated because I thought that's where you were going. So I'm glad we made it explicit. It reminds me of the scene that I always think of the most that illustrates this. I don't know if you remember this in Scandal when Jake, what was her name? What was her name? Melly. Yeah. For those who don't know, there's like a scene where I think she's already president, and then she's maybe feeling sick or something, and
she has a back problem, a back issue that she needs to straighten out all the time, and kind of knocks her down every so often.
Yeah, and that's when Jake finally makes his move, and she's like, "You didn't find me attractive. You didn't make their move until it seemed like I was." I don't know what word she used.
Wounded bird.
Yes.
A woman in need, a damsel in distress.
What is a story that illustrates for you what it means to be a creative?
It's an interesting one. A story about how it is what it means to be a creative. First, I need to unpack the whole to be a creative. It's also one I find curious because essentially we all have our areas of creativity where our imagination, and in fact, I would say it's even more than that. It's our instinct leads us down a certain path. And then the conventionality of creative is writing, directing, doing all these creative artistic things, whereas you have engineers and mathematicians and accountants who are very creative. I don't mean creative accounting in the legal sense, but I think it's just having an instinct that just tells you, yes, this is the part, this is the configuration that makes sense. And I get that when I'm writing sometimes. I found, especially when I was writing my first feature film, Ragtag, it was very much like Elizabeth Gilbert would describe it. I'd be wherever I was coming up with it. And often, because I was still in Nigeria a lot of the time, and Nigeria is nothing but epic, long church services. And so I let my mind drift and just kind of do its thing. And I have a pencil and a paper. And I'm just writing. And writing generally is an angsty thing for me. I'm at home, going to the fridge more often than I'm sitting at the keyboard because it's like, so much torture. But sometimes you just tap into this thing. And so I had several church services where I just tap into this thing. And it was like I was overhearing a conversation. I was just transcribing the conversation. So that's perhaps my most mystical story about being a creative. But on a day-to-day basis, it's really just getting up, turning up where you're supposed to be, doing the work you're supposed to be doing, especially if you're on set and you have a film that you're doing and all the actors are there and everybody's there. And you say action and everyone starts to do what you've asked them to do or what the spirit has moved them to do. And when it works, it's like a resonance. It's like a chord that's being kind of hit that just... The tuning fork says, yes, this is it. This absolutely works with my tuning fork. This is the scene. This is a moment. So on a day-to-day basis, that's what creativity looks like to me. Letting people do their thing and being the one who says, this is where it all gels together, or there's a bit of dissonance on this person's side, or this thing doesn't quite work and we can do a little better. And it's not always perfection, but there is something, I think, that is kind of like a universal gestalt that we all feel that this will resonate with all of us.
I love that story so much. And I can say, before when you describe it, it was always kind of something I'd envisioned. But on your last film, I actually got to be on set. So I got to see all of the magic that you've described really come to life. But you touched on something in the beginning of what you were sharing that I wanted to bring up. Now, I didn't pay you to say that, folks out there, but the way I introduce this whole series is I share that I believe we are all creatives, no matter what you do, even if it's not stereotypical art. And I could be wrong, but it sounded like you were kind of co-signing that you were saying that as well. I'm saying you shake your head for those on the podcast. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that belief?
I think it's down to my definition of creativity. It's about having an instinct for something where it's not necessarily all cerebral and it's definitely not all heart, but those two things come together to make you just get your vision, to be able to see something and understand how it works. I think our little daughter did something really, for me, it was just kind of amazing the other day because, she's my baby, so everything she does is amazing. She's perfect, and I will not hear anything else. But we had a guest, the first time we've had a guest in our house since COVID. We've had, various work people, but no real guests. So, and it happened while she was asleep. Guest was sitting down, and then she came out, and she's always fascinated with shoes. And for her, shoes mean it's time to go out, and she gives us our shoes all the time, which I was already thinking was cool that she would only ever give me my shoes and not my brother's shoes, and the same to her dad and to my brother, who's kind of in and out. But with this person she'd never seen before, she went to a shoe collection and brought her shoes. And I was just thinking, what sort of calculation did you go through in your head? New person, these shoes are the only shoes I haven't seen in this house before. Thus, at 15, 16 months, she was able to say, okay, new person, new shoes. This must be your shoes. I'm bringing it in. So just having that, whatever it is that at the baby level, she's not thinking, I'm working this out. It's just an instinct for her. I want to go out. Let's give this person their shoes. And I think we all have that on some level. Nothing that is intellectual, nothing that we're thinking through, but just an instinct that helps us understand that is kind of different, a different acuity from our peers. And I think that's our creativity. And if we can recognize it and just live in it and enjoy it and just kind of, if you're even very lucky, monetize it, then that's where your creativity shines, just through a natural flow of the universe through you in this one aspect that you totally understand without really understanding how you understand it.
I love that story.
Everyone should know that after baby goes to bed, we spend all evening just looking at pictures of her and thinking how amazing she is. So this is our favorite topic, without doubt.
Literally last night, I think we spent like an hour and a half. I was just going through Google Photos, like, look at this one of her. Look at this one.
Yeah. All the cosmologists have confirmed that the sun does shine out of her rear end, and we will not hear anything else. So thank you.
How has your art evolved?
I think my art has evolved, especially in the directing, the writing side, just through experience more than anything else, and just practice. There is something to be said for the 10,000 hours. I think with the writing, what comes most naturally to me is kind of like a longhand commentary storytelling. I shine at my most when I'm being autobiographical or semi-autobiographical. But now I've moved to writing screenplays and shaping my talent for writing whatever it is into a form and disciplining it and trying to make it into something else has been definitely a struggle. But then I lean on the things that I naturally excel at, which is writing about things I know very well. So using autobiographical, semi-autobiographical aspects of my life to move into the screenplay, which I think helps it shine. And then also working through just the technique and using the guidance out there, and still after that finding my own voice. So that has been a very, very kind of almost like a taming or a disciplining of my art. And then on the directing side, it is just constantly learning how best to work with different people, and sometimes having the joy and the pleasure of working with the same people where you have your shorthand, and also finding a way through getting other people out of their own heads to help them shine. So it's what I hate the term soft skills, but it's not even about the soft skill thing. It's about being able to connect with the person in a way that helps them connect with themselves and giving them a space where they can let that vulnerability out and be able to perform. And also working with this person to come up with a vision that's nothing to do with what either one of you would have thought of up on your own, and ends up just being the exact right thing to work for that group of people and create that chemistry, that very specific chemistry. So doing that and also keeping in mind the two things that I've always been taught about directing. On one hand, what matters is what ends up on the screen. So focus on what people are going to see, because no one's going to see all the other stuff behind it. And then also being very mindful that the stuff behind it is the thing that creates what's on the scenes, on the screen. So balancing those two things out.
That's deep. That's huge. That's like leadership right there. How do you balance those two things?
I found with a set, every day there's a new challenge and everything can go wrong, and everything can go terribly, wonderfully, magically without you really having much to do with it. So it's really about being on your toes and trying to just kind of be at your best. And sometimes your best that day is not brilliant, but it's all you have to give. And so you do your best the day before to try and be your best at that time. So if it's trying to get enough sleep the night before, or sometimes just making sure you've prepared as much as you can, as tired as you are, and trying to just think through all the things that will be happening the next day, and reaching out to people, all the people who are going to be involved, and trying to make sure as much as possible that you're all on the same page. You understand what you're trying to achieve. And then when you get to the day, you pray that all the chips will fall in the right place, but it won't be from lack of trying, and it won't be from lack of just, it won't be from misunderstanding, because we are all people, and we come to the set with our different moods and our different desires. And you saw on the set, we kind of knew that the alarm was going to be going off every 20 minutes, and you're trying to record some very vital scenes where people have emotions, and you need the sound to be clear and crisp. And they're getting these tiny little interludes in between that you don't know how long it's going to be before the next alarm goes off, and you have to just stop everything. And they have to stay in this place. And then, of course, all the windows are closed to keep the sound in. And so it's warm. And there's just so much going on. And you keep in mind, these are people. But then on the other hand, they're also professionals. They're also actors. They have to bring it on. And the rest of us have to be in a space to catch the performance, when even though we too are getting irritated by the alarms. And finding that as much as it was an irritant, and you could just see them growing more and more aggravated as it went along, it actually made the scene better, because they were in a space of aggravation. They were in a space of having to endure something that they really wanted to escape. And seeing the way professionals can use that, and you capture that, and you make the most of this situation that would otherwise have been super hairy.
I love that example. Just if I can set the backstory a little bit, we were on location in an apartment shooting a scene, and that apartment building was testing out the fire alarms. And so I don't know, for maybe 3 hours, every 30 seconds, the fire alarms would do this ring, 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 really, really loud and right by everybody's ear. I felt so bad for the sound person, and so that's kind of what Adaora was sharing, how she moved people through that. One art that I feel you are a master of is the art of dealing with difficult people, including myself. How has that art evolved for you?
I think it starts off by not really thinking of them as difficult people. Just, first of all, just keeping in mind that, we all have our things. God knows, I know how many things I have that would drive anybody crazy. And it's just finding people who's crazy is not so bad for you. There are some people's crazy that's actually really, really nothing to other people, but I couldn't be in any sort of long-term situation with you, because it would push all my buttons. But I find eccentricity is relatively appealing. And I find with certain types of things that would really drive other people crazy, there's a certain predictability to it. And I can live with that predictability. And I think, yeah, these are things that if we can kind of tolerate this and we know this about you, we can work through it together. And I don't know how it started. I've just kind of, I don't know, I like interesting people, and interesting people come with their other things. And so in learning to enjoy these relationships with interesting people, I have learned to manage the other things that kind of come with them.
This is a nice self-awareness moment where I was like, oh, that's why you get along with me. If you didn't have this, it wouldn't have worked. So I'm grateful you have this skill, not just for the other people you bless in their life, but for putting up with me. And that you don't think of me as a difficult person. Oh.
This is why I'm supposed to say, of course not. You're not difficult. You're a dream to live with. But you make up for all your oddness in so many ways. So yeah, it doesn't feel like a challenge most of the time.
The other times are for hikes. Talk about it on a hike. What inspires you?
On a daily basis, I guess a lot of it is a compulsion to finish what I've started. And I start lots of things, curious to see where they will go. I also am inspired by just things that will just float to me as an idea. I think growing up, my mother used to just hate how I'd be sometimes first thing in the morning after every few weeks. I'd wake up with this idea of this thing that I wanted to get done or achieve. And she'd know there was just no way around getting me to move away from this thing and sometimes it's this huge, amazing, crazy goal. And I'm on a path. And so every day I'll work towards finishing it, and just inspired by seeing where that will go, because sometimes it won't even go where I want it to go or where I think it's going to go. So I find inspiration in just seeing where this thing, this path I've started will go. And then sometimes my inspiration is I'm waking up this morning and I would like to create a tiny little space where my husband can just be cool in a tiny space by himself. How can I solve for this? And that's how I came across a little tiny portable air conditioner that creates a little air conditioned space around him and just him, and leaves me in my warmth and my peace outside. So yeah, little problems that I know would just make my life a tiny bit better, and finding solutions for them.
I don't think I've ever interviewed you before. And you've interviewed me I had you on as a guest where you interviewed me, but I don't think I've interviewed you. And I'm getting so many ahas, because when I started dating actively, where I was like, okay, let me date to find a partner, I started to get very clear on like, what are the top things I'm looking for? And I realized that one of the top things I find really attractive in someone is what you just described, where they're like, I have a goal, and anything that comes in my way will not stop me until I complete this goal. And it's like such a turn on if I can say that appropriately. I mean, you're my wife, so I think I can say that. No other guest will that ever be said to. It's awesome. That's one of the things I love the most about you. And I think I've even said to you, like, it's so hot when you get like that. So I just, it's okay. I'm saying these things on the record.
Absolutely. And I will take it to the divorce court if we ever go there, because I will be like, these are the promises he made to me. And he said it was amazing that I was ambitious and would never stop.
Took it there. You took it there.
Always, my love. I keep you on your toes. That's the other thing that you really appreciate.
It's true. It is true.
Can't take anything for granted. Not a thing, my love. Apart from our love for each other at the moment and our love for our baby.
I'd say that's the one. Our love for Jayama. Oh my gosh.
I listen to you squeeing constantly.
if you could have one impact or have a impact on society, people through your art, what would you want that to be?
I always hope that my art brings a little more compassion and through the compassion, maybe a little bit more understanding. And through the understanding, not just, tolerance, but actual celebration of someone and their interest and what makes them different and unique. And compassion and empathy. So a lot of the work I was doing previously was very much in the queer space, and coming from Nigeria, and even just as a citizen in the world, there's so much unsafe queer space that's out there. And I try to sometimes create art that will give some insight into the things that will make us a bit more willing to accept that nobody's that different from how we are, and put yourself in someone's shoes. And as a way of doing that, you feel close to the person, and they become, even if they become your exception, this person's different, or this thing is different from all my other biases. It gets through that and makes you more of a person who sees that connection between you and everybody else in the world, even people whose lives you don't imagine being anything like yours, and even people who you think, oh, I have no biases at all. Being able to see where some of these biases are, and as a result, work through them in your own time, through your own work, through your own research, through your own processing and therapy, etc., and just build a better relationship with everybody. So that's what I try and achieve in my art. My latest short is more on the racial justice arena, and also, I guess, it's an empathy video for breeders like ourselves. And so I hope through that it gives some insight and gives a sense of also resonance of everybody's human experience, and makes you relate to people better, and hence makes the world better.
I love that. Speaking of people, if you could have a dream collaboration, what would be your dream collaboration?
There's a half jokey answer I generally give to this. I would love someone to do my life story, and I would love George Clooney to play me in my life story. I think he'd do an excellent job of playing me in my life story, because I think there's so much resonance. So that would be a great collaboration. When he was alive, I always wanted to work with Anthony Minghella. I think he had so many insights that I thought were very helpful. And now, oh my goodness, there's so many artists and creatives I love working with. There are, of course, all the wonderful, famous ones who just do not have a single false move. I think both Kate Blanchett and Kate Winslet are excellent actors. And then you come to the goddesses, the Viola Davises and the Octavia Spencers. They are just, they surpass. I love some of Mindy Kaling's TV right now. I think her reimagining of Four Weddings did not get enough love. And there are just so many people who are doing awesome work. So many female directors who are doing amazing stuff. And because I'm a female director, I don't see how we would be able to work together side by side, but just being in their aura. I love what Tanya Hamilton's doing. They are out there killing it. Even with their vision and their inspiration. And then, of course, outside of the film world, Lovey Ajayi's doing awesome stuff. The Bojanistas doing awesome stuff. Bozoma St. John's doing awesome stuff. They're just, what's the lady that we were talking about the other day that we should all be millionaires? She is just inspiring the hell out of people. Rachel Rogers. Rachel Rogers. And any sort of thing that would mean that our worlds intermingle and touch. Yvonne Oji and her band Bootzled by Jesus and what she's doing with all of that and just doing her very much. I think it's one of the most brave paths out there that she's carving for herself. Even pals like Esosa E and the things that she's constantly coming up with. I'm constantly inspired by what people wake up and get up and do. Amanda Van Anan and her stuff recently, just you reimagine your life, you reimagine your choices, and you move forward and you do something else. It's been ace. It's a acey pacey time to live through.
Like, this is my favorite collaboration answers. He just gave people could just write those down and just go research some really great people if you haven't heard of all of those people.
I know, and of course, I forget the inspired people like the Michelle Obamas and the Serena Williams and the Lupita Nyong'os that we daily talk about, and I and Janelle Monáe. Hail Janelle, you know. You and I could do this all day, and we both just revel in it almost as much as just reveling in our baby's pictures.
If it wasn't clear already, it's now becoming clear why we're married. Adaora, this was such a amazing opportunity. I'm like, I got to interview you more just so I can get these little insights. Where can folks, so they want to continue this conversation with you, where can they connect with you?
Absolutely. They can connect with me on Instagram. I'm at Adaora Muka, AdaoraMuka. And you can always just go to my website at www.adaora.net and drop me a line through that. I am actually probably a bit more sharp about responding to emails that come via my website than I am on Instagram. And yeah, you can try dropping me a line on Facebook. I'm not on there as much as I could be. But yeah, your best bets are through my website, adaora.net, or through Instagram.
Wonderful. And what is your invitation to those who are listening? What would you like to invite them to do, to be, to consider, think about? What's your invitation?
My invitation is to just, as you're walking through today, if someone comes to mind, be it for a good or a bad reason, take a step deeper into your relationship with them. It could even just be someone on the street. Try and kind of maybe imagine what their last hour may have been like. And if you're in a position, connect, reach out, send them a text, something encouraging. Or if it's a stranger on the street, maybe give them a smile. Or if it's someone who is unhoused, if you have $1 or $2, something that folds, anything that folds, give it to them. And it gives you, it'll probably give you a huge vulnerability hang up for so many reasons. I hate reaching into my bag on the street. I hate just offering charity that's not necessarily being asked for. But I don't think acts of courage like that are ever a bad thing. I think they add to our life in the universe rather than take away. So my invitation is to do something about whatever it is you've done internally, do something externally as well, and see if you can add something nice to the universe.
And if you could describe our conversation in one word, what would that word be?
Raucous.
Oh, bring the ruckus. Insert Wu-Tang song. Here we go. Adaora, this was amazing. I so appreciate you. I love you. And that when I say I love you, it's like it's a different meaning than when I say to other people. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, my love. This has been a pleasure. I'm glad you asked at the time. I was able to say yes, and love you too.
Today's date is June 24th, and we are joined by one of my favorite people on the planet. And if I were to meet people in other universes, I think you'd still stack up against them too. We're joined by Cet. How you doing today, Cet?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's always fun getting to do a recording with you.
He always giggles not very far into it.
I know. I like interviewing people who it's also highly likely they're going to give me some shit about like the questions I am or just who I am. And that's just always a blast.
I do feel like I just like, if I think of myself as like a character in your story, that's just part of what my character does, is just give you shit.
And those are important characters. So we're going to jump in with the fun question. That's the easiest thing for everybody, is to somehow describe yourself in 6 words.
6 words. Loving, creative, loyal, weird. What is sorry, I have to picture the word to say it. Loyal, creative, weird, protective. Yeah, protective is how you conjugate that, right? Yeah. And curious.
Ooh, I like it. What does this say about who Cet is?
I think it speaks to the vastness of me within some sort of limit, because I do have the need for some structure, and like that's probably played out in the ways in which I'm loyal or who I'm loyal to, but that there's an infinite amount of facades to me or things that I'm interested in.
I love that. I would say, if we can get it out the gate, Cet is to blame for me having gotten in the coaching course creator world. You're like, hey, check this out. I was like, I think I like this.
I did not know what I was about to be blamed for. Probably true, but oh Lord, what is it?
So we are going to talk about some of the second one you said, creative. So what is a specific story in your life or someone else's life that illustrates what it means to be a creative?
I think to try to boil it down to a story would be fairly reductive, because creativity is such a generative thing that's ongoing. It's not finite. And for me, when I think of creativity, I think of any number of moments in my life, or when I look at especially kids, where you look at something and then you say, I wonder what else, and you create like a backstory for it, or think of the infinite ways that it can develop, right? And for me, that's how creativity plays out in my life, because it's an ongoing regenerative thing that causes me to generate new stuff, and especially with my particular kind of mental health issues. Like, I'm constantly trying to connect the dots and create something that's greater than the sum of its parts, which I think is what creativity boils down to.
What is that last part mean? What do you mean by the greater than the sum of its parts?
So I'm constantly trying to figure that out myself. So if you ask me in the future, this answer could change in 15 minutes or 15 days. But something where, the ingredient, like cooking, right? That individually, all of the ingredients in a dish may be decent, they're good, but then you put them together and chemistry and art happens, and they alchemize and create this thing that is wonderful beyond what the individual components could be. Like the ingredients in butter chicken, for example. Butter, good. Chicken, good. Fenugreek or whatever else that you particularly put in it, good. You combine them, magic.
I love that. So what are some of the ingredients of creativity then that you're usually or sometimes or one time, or maybe we might find you mixing together?
Something concrete or observational that happened in the real world. So it might be a news story. It might be a snippet of something overheard, might be a joke mixed with possibility of like, what could this become in the future, or creating a backstory of like, how did we get here? Like there's a song that I heard that the songwriter wrote, and he had seen a story about like somebody in love, and then was like, I wonder what went into that, like what was behind that. And basically the song is the backstory that he thought up for whatever he had looked at. It's the guy that wrote I Can't Make You Love Me. sang by Bonnie Raitt. And so for me, that's a huge part of how I create, or creating what I want to see, basically. If I'm like, why isn't anybody talking about this? Or why isn't anybody addressing this particular part of this? Like, what's missing? So like noticing what's missing according to what I want to see, not some arbitrary definition of what I think complete looks like.
What are some of the ways that you like to create or find yourself creating if you're not liking it, but still are?
Even when I'm not trying, I guess community would be one of them. So even though I'm an introvert, people seem to think I play an extrovert on TV because of like whatever I put off when I'm around people, then I just like end up creating tribes wherever I go. But concretely, writing, I'm not doing too much painting right now because I don't have the space. Well, not doing any painting right now, but writing and getting back into some video production, but not like documentary or narrative stuff. Working with some motion graphics because I really like kinetic type, and I really clearly, as a writer and someone that does a lot of public speaking and workshops, I think that words have power and cast spells. And I also think it's important to, if you have the ability to hear, to listen to the source of where things come from. So like right now I'm planning out and collecting assets, like the pieces that are going to go into pieces of speeches that I like. So I've done one from like this preacher named Carlton Pearson before. I've done one with a snippet of Audre Lorde. And that's something that I want to do a lot more of, because like certain people in certain spaces know who some of these people are, but it's not like Audre Lorde is not common conversation. And so kinetic type is something that I'm increasingly into, but the written word and also any place that the written word is spoken or conversations happen. So like podcasts as well. And that will be getting a reboot soon. I just could not maintain it during early pandemic.
It's so interesting. About a year and a half ago, I went deep into kinetic words, kinetic type too. For those of us who are like, who, what, what's going on? Well, how would you describe it?
So kinetic type is basically, it's basically just putting words to motion. So it's visual. So if you can't see, I'm sorry, you're SOL on seeing it. But it's just taking words and stringing them together in sort of like an editing format, like you would put video together, but moving those words around or images around to some sort of beat, usually the beat of what's being said, or to help illustrate what's being said.
Well, I'm super excited to see the stuff that you put out there. That's going to be fun.
Thank you.
How has your art evolved?
I think when I was younger, and especially while I was in school and getting a grade for any sort of art, it was kind of checkbox, like trying to make my vision fit a rubric, and also trying to be like complete. And even though it was art, trying to make whatever I was creating sort of unreproachable, like beyond reproach, or thinking in advance of like the things that you could attack it for, or say that it's lacking. And whereas now I'm going to create it because I want to. Like one of my scales of one of my litmus tests are, particularly with like writing or speaking, is this something that I need to say, or is this something that you need to hear? And so I come up with scales like that where I balance whether something is for me, for others, and then how much I need to destroy to create. And it's more about the process than just making something fit a rubric.
Okay, so many questions. So the first, you mentioned it at the end, I was going to go there, is how have you seen this affect the process or influence the process?
It's led to be me being more authentic all around. And in the process, I learned how neurotic I am and the ways in which I am neurotic. Like I remember I did a painting a few years ago called Done. And it was during a period where I told myself I could not put a hole through any paintings or throw anything away for a year. So if I wanted to start over, I would have to paint over it. So this painting actually has at least 5 versions beneath the finished product. And then I was hearing like other voices in my head, but not like hallucinating, hearing like possible criticisms of it, or hearing why the stroke I made or the decision I made, because it's abstract, it's not concrete shapes, hearing like why that might be a poor choice. And I like to use different sorts of material, not all of which are archival. And if you're not familiar, if you're listening and you're not familiar with the term archival in reference to paintings, it's honestly, I think it's snobbery, but it's an argument around the kind of materials you use and how well they're going to hold up. And in the process, I was like, these are not my voices. These are the voices and criticisms of other people that I'm hearing. And so in the process, I learned to hear my own voice more and learn to separate out who else am I hearing versus what do I actually think, feel, what is my goal with this piece, what do I care about?
I love that. It was funny because when I was, I had eye surgery, I got LASIK and I can see without glasses, but it was awesome. But for like 6 days, I couldn't open my eyes. And so I listened to this really boring documentary about like some art that was stolen in Boston, and it was on Netflix, and like how they would test the different paint fragments and pigments. And I was like, oh, that must be the archival stuff. So that's kind of where my mind went to while I was listening. But back to some things you were saying before, you're talking about your scale of like, is it for what I need to say or what needs to be heard? What do I need to create? What do I need to destroy? What do you do with that? If it's like, well, this is something that more needs to be heard than I need to say, what happens? Or if it's mostly what I need to say than what needs to be heard, how does that influence what you do?
So I think it depends on where I'm at in my life then. Like if I'm in a period of trying to not blow hot air, then I'm going to err on the side of maybe I should wait to say this instead of saying it now. And sometimes oftentimes and increasingly, it's just for the sake of my awareness to recognize what my motivations and intentions are when I'm creating something or disseminating it. So it's not always depending on the answer, I have to either do it or I have to not do it. It's knowing my own intentions and motivations for what I'm doing.
What did you say was the last thing you said?
Does that answer your question?
Yes. I love how a lot of people throw on the buzzword of like intentional and authenticity. And I love how you are creating like systems for getting the feedback.
That's exactly what it is. Because especially with art and creativity, people like to assume that everything is laissez-faire. And you see this especially with children, that when you have a structure, it's easier to be spontaneous because there's a measure of safety, or the structure allows you to figure out where you can deviate. And as much as I like freedom and want freedom, if I have absolutely no systems, I'm going to fall apart. Like I'm just as likely to become depressed from having absolutely no structure as I am from something terrible happening to me. And so systems allow me to see, how I'm doing things similarly or differently than I have before. And also they allow me to see where can I deviate depending on what I'm trying to create. Like if I'm trying to create this one painting or this one written piece that has a similar impact to something I've done before, let me recreate that process. But then how can I make it different is the deviation, whereas following the same way I did it before is the structure, if that makes sense.
Makes absolute sense. And I think that it's a gem for folks, especially creatives, where it's like, I want no structure, be able to do whatever I want. And most of us would thrive under some discipline and structure.
Yeah.
But the inverse, if it's too rigid, then they're not going to have the flow. So I like it's finding the balance. That's a real nice.
Yeah. That's why I look at structure as the container to hold something. And that container might be a square, it might be a rectangle, it might be a cylinder. It doesn't have to just be one thing all the time. And it's how much can you fit in there? Like for hip hop dance is a really good example of this. Like people are like, I can't dance. And I'm like, find your 2-step. And with hip hop, that you can fit anything you can fit in between those beats fits as long as you stay on the beat. So sometimes structure is just a beat. Like it does not mean this overly complicated thing that boxes you in. It's just a beat so you can find your rhythm.
You're getting cheat codes here, y'all. Cheat codes. What inspires you, Cet?
Children inspire me a lot, honestly. They're so wild, and even when they're getting on my nerves, they're so wild and free. And old people that have made it, honestly, like I think it's such a shame that as people age, they just recede into the background. Because I was telling somebody at church this the other day, they're coming up on their 30th wedding anniversary, and they have like a complimentary quirkiness to them. And I was like, I'm so glad that y'all exist and are here, because like you're showing me how to the template for what one way that my life can look. And the other old folks that are there, folks that are much older than this couple that I'm talking about, but old folks like give me a template of the various ways my life could look, but then also just people living unapologetically. The seasons also inspire me. I'm really inspired by nature. So yeah.
I love that. I'm going to co-sign all those things.
Probably why we're friends.
What'd you say? Why we're friends?
To say this is probably why we're friends.
Yes, we love nature, kids, and old people. I mean, it's the bedrock of any good relationship. If you could create one impact or change one thing about society with your art, what would it be?
I want my art to give people permission to be themselves. Like, I say a lot of things that some people, depending on how conservative or not outgoing you are, you might think are just outlandish, that I really truly mean. Like, I'm not saying it for shits and giggles, or I'm not saying it for shock value. I'm saying it because it's what I actually think. And I have strong opinions, but they're loosely held. So they are subject to change. But I will say it, whatever I say, with the conviction that I have at the time and the experience that I have at the time, right? And so if somebody looks at me, even if they disagree with me and they think what I'm saying or putting out is crazy, and they're like, look at the crazy shit this bitch is doing. If she can do that, then I can do this because it's not that crazy. Even if that's why they go for something, I'm here for it. But at its highest, I would want my impact to be somebody like read something or felt something when they looked at a piece of visual art of mine, and they decided to apply it to their life, that they were like, I can go for this in my life or create my version of it. That's my ultimate goal.
I love that. Two things come up for me. First of all, strong opinions loosely held. That's got to be a chapter in your autobiography. Second, it reminds me when I started doing video, putting out video of you being that gentle reminder, sometimes not gentle, like be yourself now. We don't need the Tom Earl, like be yourself. The Tom that the people get to hang out with behind the scenes. That's who we want to see. So it reminds me of that, like be yourself in your art. You know what I mean?
Show up. Like that's what it is. If my art contributes to people showing up as their full selves and not showing up in fragments, that's my legacy.
Amen. Show up as your full self, not as in fragments.
Yeah, done fragments.
What would be a dream collaboration for you?
Artistic collaboration, right? Okay.
I mean, I'm curious, however you want to interpret it. I'm curious where else you're going with it.
I mean, I saw something that I'm not sure was real with like a Nicki Minaj picture and Rihanna the other day, and I was like, I would get in the middle of that. But
what's it, Nicki Minaj and who?
And Rihanna.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'm like, put me in the game, coach. But I don't know. I wouldn't do a song. That's probably a different kind of creative collaboration. I think I would love to collaborate with. It might be twofold. So one with queer artists, and then another with artists across the Caribbean and Desi diasporas in capturing personal and family histories. Because one of my things is that I think that if you're not creating, you're contributing to your own erasure. And I don't think that has to be any sort of just one type of creation. I would like to have I don't know if culture keeping is the right word, because I don't want it to sound like gatekeeping, but a collaboration with other queer artists and then Caribbean and Desi artists that captures what people's lives look like now. Because if I think about, like, what if the world became like Gilead from The Handmaid's Tale, or some dystopian future where they try to say that we didn't exist and there was always this one homogenous society? I want for there to be a record that no, there was not.
It gives context to what you said. If you're not creating, you're contributing towards your own erasure.
Yeah.
Damn it, Cet. There's so much more I want to talk about.
My bad, Dad.
We got to have you back, and sooner than later. Like from the last one.
All right.
Where can folks get at you?
Everywhere on every platform, I am at Cet Mohamed-Moore, CETMOHAMED. I am mostly active on Instagram, especially stories. I cannot tell you to only expect appropriate things in those stories, but I share creative stuff, memes, glimpses of life, and then my website, CetMohamed-Moore.com, or Cet@CetMohamed-Moore.com is my email.
And we'll have all that in the show notes, y'all. I co-sign. Awesome Instagram. Cet, you're just an awesome person. What would you like your invitation to be for those who are listening? What would you like to invite them to do, be, consider, think about, evolve into, read, chuckle about? What's your invitation?
Evolve it to yourself. Even if that looks like it might be a regression and you have to take some steps back to remember who you are, in the words of the Lion King, evolve into yourself. And if that is mutually exclusive to some of the existing relationships or responsibilities that you have in your life that don't come from a place of self, so be it.
Evolve into yourself. That's what she said, right?
Yep.
Oof. Gosh, so many great lines in here. Strong opinions loosely held, showing up as yourself, not in fragments. If you're not creating, you're contributing towards your own erasure, and evolve into yourself. Ooh.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's my story and I'm stuck with it.
Cet, I love you so much, and I'm so grateful that you took this time to be with us. I appreciate you.
Love you too, Merle. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you. I hope our guests from this week allowed you to find new avenues and new ways of thinking about creativity. Creativity isn't just for those who self-describe themselves as artists. All of us have ways that we are profoundly expressing our creativity every single day. And I hope my guests today helped you to connect more deeply with your creativity. I'd love to know your thoughts on this week's episode. You can reach out to me at Tom Earl Artist on all social media, tom@tomearl.com via email, or if you'd like to learn how you can use your creativity in your marketing, in your Facebook and Instagram ads specifically, we have a ton of resources for you. You can find by going to tomearl.me/ads, tomearl.me/ads. My friends, it has been an honor. I am so grateful for you sharing your most powerful resources, your time and energy with me. And as always, I'm wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at tomearl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.